After leaving Atlanta behind, the next stop on our tour was Birmingham, Alabama. Being a part of the Deep South, the city was once highly segregated. In the 1960s, the pushback against the civil rights movement and the end of segregation led to a lot of violence in Birmingham. It quickly became clear to us that the city is still dealing with the repercussions of its segregated past. We went on a tour given by Pam King and Colin Davis, who introduced us to several churches in downtown Birmingham. They talked to us about the development of religion in their city. Throughout the tour, King outlined Birmingham's history for us. As a largely industrial city, Birmingham was predominantly working class, and in the early 20th century, it was home to a very active labor movement. What stood out most about the churches we visited was that along with being racially divided, each church's congregation also belonged to either the working or the middle class, with hardly any mingling going on.
Fred Shuttlesworth had been on the ground, he had been organizing, he'd been doing civil rights, he'd been working with his constituents who were blue collar and African American, right? And so his movement had been going on for 10 years. By the time Martin Luther King ever set foot in Birmingham, basically. And so he's the one that invited Martin Luther King to Birmingham. And these are men with huge egos, all of them, huge egos. But he decides that he will tone down his ego and get Martin Luther King, who he thinks is way too moderate, way too, middle class for him.
I thought that in terms of the civil rights movement, it gave a pretty nice contrast to what we've learned about the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King's involvement in that in Atlanta. And here, it was in Birmingham, it was mostly talk about Fred L. Shuttlesworth, and that he is the local hero there. So I thought it was quite interesting because I didn't know that before. Most of the people that are interested in the civil rights movement go with Martin Luther King as being the head everywhere of that movement, but apparently not so much in Birmingham.
The next day was Sunday, so in the morning we had the unique opportunity to participate in the service at the 16th Street Baptist Church, a traditionally African-American church with a rich history.
I think we were all overwhelmed with that service. I mean, I kind of expected something special, something extraordinary, what I've heard of the Baptist service in general, but the actual thing for me was just baffling. They had everything. They had the choir, they had the very passionate speeches of the pastor, even the shaking, the emotions, the affect was all in there, and well, I was basically blown away by it, I think.
Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain.
that stood out most for me was the social gospel. He even told this one joke where he was in his car with his wife, and they had to stop at a red light and saw some, I guess, attractive woman crossing the street. And he said that it's all right to look, it's all right to glance, but do not gaze at her. That's not in the spirit of the Bible, I guess, then. So it was very direct and pragmatical, I guess, advice.
After the service, we visited the Birmingham Civil Rights Museum to learn more about the civil rights movement.
My overall impression of the Civil Rights Museum in Birmingham was a very impressive one, since it really captures the heart of the entire movement and the history of the movement, and has so many different ways of portraying that, like the video footage, audio recordings, and these display sections where we get to see a segregated classroom, for example.
On our last day in Birmingham, we met with Horace Huntley, the director of the Civil Rights Institute's Oral History Project. He told us about his personal experiences as a young man in the segregated South. During his talk, he helped us gain a new perspective on Birmingham's violent past and explained the role of churches and religious leaders in the civil rights movement.
So what I wanted to do when I got to Canada, I wanted to be able to sit in front of the bus. I was 18 years old. I went to Canada first time. I sat right in the front seat. This is what I would like to have been able to do at home, but I couldn't do it, so I sat there. And when I sat there, and about a block or so, a young white woman got on the bus, and she sat right next to me. Now, you have to imagine, you may not be able to imagine this, but now here is a black kid from Birmingham, Alabama, who's never had any association with white women particularly, and because if you did, your life was threatened. Here I am now, 2,000 miles away from that venue. When that white woman sat down next to me, it was as if Bull Connor was there watching me, and I just tensed up. I was frightened. Not only did she sit next to me, she started a conversation with me. And after, we talked for a while, I guess I must have forgotten about Bull Connor. And we had a very good conversation, But my point is, here I am, first time out of the South, first time out of the country, and I'm looked upon then as a man.
You can learn about the civil rights movement from academics and from history books and stuff like that, and you get a general idea of the suffering that it held, but until you talk to people that actually went through it, you don't really understand it completely.
SCLC, which was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, was actually organized by ministers. The Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights here in Birmingham was organized by ministers. So the leadership came from the religious community where the movement was concerned. And that was very important, because if you got to the leadership, the ministers, that's where most of the people were, in the churches. So that is the place where you would tap most of those folk who would be actively involved. And as you know, it is where the mass meetings were held, were at the churches. So religion, religious leaders, and those parishioners, without them, the movement would never have evolved in the manner that it did.